Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever, however you are joining us. This is the I Speak Jeep podcast presented by SFJ4x4.com. My name is Neil with SFJ4x4, Simpson Family Jeeps, Conneaut, Ohio. Joined in Grandma's Couch Studio
by Jeff Shermani,
the Italian Stallion,
and
the maddest mad scientist.
The maddest mad scientist. The fixer of Toyotas that identify as Jeeps. And we'll just leave it as that. Today's going to be a whirlwind.
There's a lot going on, especially the fact that you literally ran in and sat down, and somehow by the time the intro was done, we're seated like you were here the whole time.
The whole time. I was just relaxed, calm, cool, collected. I'll be honest with you as I was doing the intro. And it's valuable to know if you're joining us for the first time. We are live. We are live with the Book of Faces. You're welcome to come join us, jump in the comments, share, share stories and talk with other people. We love that. But also unlike other podcasts, and we do have a secondary podcast that Jeff and I, that Jeff produces and Jeff and I are in, that is pre-recorded. This is a live, so if you're listening to us in your ear holes at a later date, know that we don't really go back and edit this, right?
No.
But with that said, I almost flubbed up, and I couldn't remember what podcast I was supposed to be shooting because the phone didn't stop ringing this morning.
Yeah,
Jeff has the entire showroom completely decimated.
It looks really good right now.
It looks amazing right now.
We actually have. You didn't know this, but while you were working with a customer that walked in this morning, I was quoting a customer on a 3.6 engine swap who's literally going to be here as soon as we're done filming.
Oh my gosh, that is hysterical. And so I got to tell you folks, and we got comments streaming in, and I want to get to them in a hot second, but this is going to be a roller coaster ride of a podcast. And so you're going to want to stay in there if you're listening to us, if you're on the Book of Faces, hang in there because we're going to have some high highs and some low lows, and we're going to, share with you accordingly. So today is too hot to handle.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be talking about overheating Jeeps, kind of set that ball up last week because of that heat wave that not only that it affected us in North America, but I heard that like the Middle East and everything was extra
hot everywhere.
It was hot everywhere, and I didn't realize that. I was talking to my dad. We had I have a reveal. I have to admit something to our listeners. It's time for me to come clean about something, and so I will make that proclamation, unfortunately, today on air to our listening base. And then we also have a tremendous passing in our Jeep community that we have to address as well.
Yeah.
So, we'll share that as we go.
Plus, we have an event coming up. I mean, there's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. So, you guys, where do you want to jump off at? I mean, we got a bajillion and one comments.
Let's go through some of these comments because, I mean, they're on fire this morning. So we got Amy saying good morning from me and Evie. Giaga Jeepers, good morning, SFJ 4x4. Daddy Jeep, hey guys. Nathan, good morning. Nick, morning boys. Dale, morning guys. Scott, morning guys. Nick is saying, nice, you dressed up for the podcast, Neil.
I did.
You do look fancy in your tux shirt. And then Nathan saying, tool time, plastic welders are one of my new favorite tools. Used one on Saturday to put my Gladiator's taillights back together after one too many interaction with trees.
Well, Jeff wouldn't know anything about that.
No.
Hey, my taillights are fine. Bumper's a different story. Probably could use that plastic welder for that.
Probably could.
And then Giaga Jeepers, good. My JK started running hot Saturday, so perfect that we're going to be talking about that.
Yes. And so just to swing back through there and make a couple notations. So good morning to everybody, first of all, who's already jumped into the comments and shared with us. I know that a number of folks have been on the move, kind of traditional summer fashion. I think Scott Lindquist, a good friend and extension of the business, is in Colorado this morning.
Yeah.
He's joining us from Colorado.
Pictures are amazing.
Also, Rob Morgan was in our hometown locale. And
I saw the picture.
He thought he was pretty tough when he posted up just like this cryptic picture about like his dinner view.
Yeah,
and
I knew exactly where.
I knew exactly where.
I
We all
knew
looked
where
at
he
that.
was.
And if you're listening to us globally, and we thank you for that because we're in 35 countries because of you, our listeners, and thank you so much for that. But if you're listening to us globally, we are situated just basically a half mile from the Great Lake of Lake Erie. And there is a number of establishments where you can go and be at peace with the most spectacular sunsets, arguably, in the world.
Yeah.
And that's where Rob was. He thought he was pretty tough that he was putting up this cryptic picture.
As he put good barbecue there too.
Good. I'm glad that he appreciated it. There was a former business there. Now there's a new business there. They're getting their feet wet in the local clientele. So excellent. We've got a lot going on.
Yeah.
And I think that it's an opportunity, or it's a moment right now before we jump into a little bit of our weekend update. We're going to start with some of our we're going to feed out some things to you guys, low and slow here, like our barbecue. We are actually going to be taking a summer break.
Yep.
And so I am breaking the news to you all, and we need you to hang in there with us through the process. But we are only going to have, this is podcast number 4. There will be 3 remaining podcasts. And then we are going to take a 6-week break. Not because there's anything wrong, but because things are so good that we are taking that time to reinvest in this podcast for you, our listeners. So like any of the other short-term breaks that we've taken in the past, there will be a change-up coming in September, because we will go through July 15th, I believe it is.
Yeah, July 15th will be our last live record date. So the 17th will be the last audio release date for those that listen to it, not watch it.
We're going to throw out a couple teasers in the break time just to keep you, wanting us. And
if you're on Patreon, you'll even get more of that insight as to what's going on. That's going to be kept a secret only for our Patreon subscribers.
Absolutely. And then September 2, we will be back in the fall for our relaunch of season 5. Is that correct, Jeff? Season 5,
yeah,
I believe.
Season 5. It'll be season 2 for American Hustle, season 5 of I Speak Jeep.
Yes, and so this is episode 4, and then we have 3 remaining episodes.
The countdown is on.
The countdown is on. It's part of why I'm dressed in my best attire. For our folks listening at home, I am in last year's signature tuxedo T-shirt. Of which, is this dashing red and black tuxedo T-shirt that, just is a party in the front type of occasion. Anywho, so that's one of our announcements for you going forward. Our weekend updates. What do you got? What do you guys?
I mean, my weekend was pretty busy, but I was in Erie again for the nonprofit. We actually recruited yet another regular volunteer for our organization who's going to be our social media manager as we progress and go forward.
Nice.
Well known in Erie scene as a downtown diva, so really fun to get her on board. And then I spent the rest of the weekend working on the policies and procedures manual that it turns out a lot of grants want to see that or see specific policies within there, and we hadn't actually formally developed one, so I wrote an 85-page manual this weekend.
You know what? It was probably a good weekend to be inside working at the desk.
It was, and I had planned to mow my lawn this weekend, but it rained all day Sunday on and off, so it was real wet.
Yes.
So I just didn't get to that, but that, and then I spent several hours working on a special thing that we're going to have here today in honor of what happened over the weekend.
Yes, for sure. We'll get to that. Scott, what?
So
you've been putting miles on that car. People keep messaging me and being like, "Where'd Scott take the car now?"
Well,
I kid you not.
And speaking of, Chuck is saying Summit Nationals this weekend. Bring that flathead down. So
I've been wanting to get 500 miles on it so I can get the first oil change done. Get all the nasties out of the break-in process of the motor. So I've just been kind of, focused on doing that. Plus, it's just fun to drive. We did reach maximum fun on rattles, heat off the floor, and general temperature on Saturday, though. Me and my wife took it Friday on a date to Erie. And coming home, that was spectacular. It cooled off. We had the windshield folded out. We had the cowl vent open. windows all down, and it just really was nice coming home from a restaurant. And I was like, yeah, that was awesome. So we can do that again, but we'll go to Menor this time with the kids. And there's this car show that was at it's like this little diner up there. It's been going on forever. And sadly, attendance was down because it was so hot. Plus, it's on an asphalt parking lot. We did not stick around. we let the car cool off and retreated to a Wendy's with the air conditioning and licked our wounds, got some drinks, and then made our slow way back. Obviously, this is not a freeway car. We are taking back roads. We also came to the conclusion that we as a Northeast Ohio need to work on our back roads. They are rough.
They're perfect for Jeeps.
They're perfect for
they're great for Jeeps. Lowered to the max 36 Fords, not so much.
Fair.
Lots of banging and clanging.
That's how I feel in the Mini Cooper, man.
But when we got home, everyone, kids were awesome. They were saints the entire time. No fighting or anything in the back seat, which is unheard of. Literally at one point, Evie was tapped and she literally laid out on the back sofa on her brother's lap at some point. So that was kind of cute.
Nice.
But I've been basically all day Sunday or Saturday afternoon. I looked at insulation
for the car
because the floors were extremely hot.
Yes,
I'm sure.
I was actually shocked watching some videos of people actually measuring temperature. And they were getting 150 to 170 degrees off floorboards without insulation. I was like, oh, okay, I feel that.
I believe that.
Yeah.
So
I believe that.
But when I first got the car on the road, it had 63,378 or 9 miles on the speedo, and we are now 63,865 or 62. So I am so close. I'm
Congratulations.
really close of getting that 500 miles on, to the point where I'm like, okay, where do I get oil from? What's this look like?
Right.
Well, and Daddy Jeep was in the comments saying he was hoping to see it in the wild while he was in town.
Oh, yeah. We let it rest in its air conditioned box yesterday.
Listen to you.
I was actually out mowing my lawn in between raindrops because yesterday, and the weather like parted. Sun came out, and I was like, what time is it? Looked at it, I was like, it's almost time to go to the lake. And literally went on Facebook to see if they had canceled or not. And 4 minutes before that, they had canceled the show.
Oh, jeez.
So I was like, okay. So I finished mowing, came in for lunch, and my wife's, or dinner at that point, actually. Wife's like, we going to the car show? It's like, they canceled it. So we're just going to relax. We got all the household chores done. So
sure.
And that's a good
important.
reset.
Yeah, it's important. Gives you clarity of your mind, you know?
Yes. So I'm tickled. Plan hopefully this Thursday, looking like it's going to be cooled off a little bit. Like the lowest as of yesterday, it was the coolest day this week. And my friend out of Buffalo is planning to bring his 32 Ford sedan into town, and we'll be able to run around with a pair of the sedans and get some pictures and stuff, and ending up at Conneaut Township Park
for the car show there.
That'll be cool.
Over the lake, looking over the lake. Super cool. Excellent.
What about you?
So I've kind of continued my on fire nature of life as well through the weekend. And of course we had this outrageous heat happening.
Yes. To which I see you made Cheap Jeep 2 completely naked at this point. Because if you're going to sit in the heat, you might as well get a suntan.
Absolutely, right?
I mean, I got a nice tan going.
And so I'm gonna get to some of those more levity of my weekend updates and whatnot. But I do have a very appropriate reveal. There's rumors out there in the greater community that there's something I need to come clean about, and I need to do a public admittance.
It might be on camera right now.
I'm wearing Crocs.
He is.
I've spent a lot of my life
picking on people with Crocs
down to Crocs and people who wear Crocs, and
They all corrupted him.
He appropriately chose the same color I have.
and I got him as a gag gift because I was so anti-Croc.
For those that
so
are wondering,
long.
he has them in the non-forceful strap position.
The non-forceful strap.
He
I
has
am
it ready to run yet.
Your
not sprinting in my Crocs.
your gag gift, if I remember right, came with headlights.
Came with headlights. So my shout out to my brother-in-law for great sense of humor, and then my son for kind of helping perpetuate it. But yes, they got me a set of Crocs and then ordered me little headlights, and so.
So this is just too fitting. So I actually was watching a reel, and there was this movie in the late 90s, early 2000s that was supposed to be a silly movie. So they wanted to have footwear on the people in the movie that would be silly.
Sure.
And someone in the shooting was like, what happens if these shoes catch on and then they're not silly anymore? And they're like, these will never not be silly shoes. And they were Crocs.
That is awesome.
They show a
That is
picture of everybody
They're
on
still
set
silly.
They're still
with
so-
Crocs.
and I have no problem calling them my dignity sieves because my manliness and it's just seeped out the edges of them. But God, they're so comfortable.
Right?
In the comments, Chuck is OMG, and then please say you aren't driving a Toyota. Also, he's not.
I'm not.
And then Dale's saying, Neil, fanny pack and Crocs.
He was here for the fanny pack.
I'm here, right?
He's a convert on the Crocs.
I'm convert on the Crocs, and I have been switching them out. Obviously, once I get to work, but
he doesn't have
today-
steel toe Crocs.
I don't have steel toe Crocs yet.
He comes in and sits down right as the intro's finishing, and I'm like, really, you got to put your Crocs on me?
But yeah, I was right touching Jeffrey's leg there. So, so yeah, there's my public apology if I
Offended.
blatantly offended and or made fun of you for having Crocs on.
Yes.
Now, other updates. I mean, at the shop, I've been playing carpenter. Have you been playing carpenter at the house?
I have been playing carpenter at the house. I've also been doing siding. My wife's ridiculous, dream garden is continuing to take form. This raised bed encapsulated. Of course, we had this big emergency because now we're getting into summer bloom flowers, and summer bloom flowers are very attractive in their aroma to the wildlife. So now there's like this heightened level of emergency to get it fully enclosed, which is the expectation. So we're doing that. We're working on the house. All of the house build things are progressing appropriately. I'm looking forward to getting. We passed our septic system. For those of you, if you're just kind of noodling into the podcast, my wife and I took an abandoned 10 acres of family-owned hayfield, a hayfield that I grew up working as a little kid for the family farm, and my wife and I broke ground on it in its entirety. So, kind of getting that flavor of from start to finish. Now, with that said, it's been kind of fun.
Well, at least you're used to sweating in that field.
Absolutely. I'm used to sweating in that field. I'm used to like pushing myself within inches of,
Yes.
of comfort, or past the edge of comfort. With that said, the utility process has been challenging. And what my wife and I are doing, again, a little contrary to the standard conventional American Western home build, is we are, within reason, refusing to take any type of mortgage on any of it. And so it's important for my wife and I to do the bulk of the physical construction work, learn things in the process, and do it in a arguably cash basis. So it's like your car. It's a couple of years in.
I mean, I'm 5 years in on our house, and that's exactly what we did. And there are things still that I'm going, I should have done that different. And I would, but going back and redoing it just is rewarding, and having that.
With that said, when we do stuff like that, we need like a disclaimer sign, because I had this happen at the show.
Don't do what I do.
No.
Oh, okay.
Because some old curmudgeon wandered up beside the car as we were getting ready to leave. Like, you gonna leave it like that, or you gonna finish it? I've been working on it for 4.5 years. Was my response. That was all I could muster. I
Yes.
was like, it's been off the frame. It's all the way back together. And you get to watch him like, oh,
Right.
Yes,
Right.
I'm sitting on 88-year-old seats that need patched. Leave me alone, man.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
like,
I'm just out here to drive it, dude.
yeah, like, good
Oh,
grief.
goodness.
Like,
And so,
yes, our house build is taking some time.
our house build is taking some time.
But we're doing it unconventionally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the big challenge. I've got a couple friends who ran out and got builder loans and that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, and I see them making massive progress.
Yep.
A huge shout out to my wife for being a saint. Like, I honestly thought to myself, like, who marries me with the just absolutely cattywampus stuff that I get us into?
Yeah.
Right?
Right?
I
Fair.
mean, I'm
Fair
in the
sta-
same exact.
fair statement, right? So one of the things that I did do over the weekend, which I'll probably throw up on my social, is I've got my irrigation system down. I have a mobile. If you kind of don't know the peculiarities, everything I want to do, I want to be mobile. I like moving chess pieces, and so I built this pretty cool freshwater irrigation system out of like a 275-gallon polytote electric motor. So I just kind of went through a couple different revisions of it. My wife and I had an opportunity to use it over the weekend. It's awesome, working cool. And so that's a pretty unique little piece that we put together over the weekend. Other than that, it was just putzing around here at the shop. Cheap Jeep number 2, if you're unaware, I had the opportunity based on, honestly, somebody who found us on YouTube, watched a bunch of the videos, got really excited, and wanted to sell us a Jeep.
Yeah.
And thank you to that gentleman for that opportunity. And so while it is a cheap financially, it was affordable. It's not actually a cheap Jeep. Like, it's actually a really nice.
He's in the Rubicon Club now.
I may or may not have joined the JK, the school bus Rubicon folks. Don't worry, it's a 3.8, so it's absolutely still a
He
dog.
can now join our minivan clan at Southington.
Oh,
Yes.
I'll ride it with my Crocs.
With his Crocs.
Crocs fanny pack. Coming to Southington near you will be the tuxedo T-shirt.
The holes really help
the
on the
Crocs.
foot peg for the air.
Oh, God. Horrible. Horrible. So, yeah, I'll be running the minivan here sooner than later. Well, I am. I stripped it over the weekend. If I could take the windshield off of JKU, I would. When they fold down, they look dumb.
Yeah.
Thank you for the JLs and the engineers who made the JLs fold down better, but whatever. So, yeah, that's stripped, and then Leo and I did some projects around here and had a great weekend. It was a banger. It was really a banger. Now, it all did catch up with me on Sunday morning, and I was so thankful that God gaveth us that rain and that just moment where I was like, you know what? I can just be at rest.
Yes.
You know?
I don't have to go water things right now.
Yeah, and I can just kind of hang out inside and attend to some household laundry and, dishes and just life, right? So all is well.
It was actually really funny that last night when I was texting with you and you said, or I said I was going to come in early and try to finish up some of that framing, and you're like, well, that's awfully ambitious of you, but I'll take it. And I'm thinking, that's not like Neil. Normally you're like, oh yeah, let's tackle it.
You know what? I was trying to muster up. It's so funny you called me out on air on that one too, because I wanted to be like, hell yeah, Jeff, get in there and hammer away. But like, also, I want to be like, oh, make sure you're taking time for your family and like balancing life and blah 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 blah. Like, how do you know? And I know what I really wanted to say. You know, but then I wanted to be like, oh, okay, like, hey, I'm affirming you. You did. Like, you came in, and there's a big surprise happening. It's not a surprise, but a big renovation happening, and Jeff is kind of chiefly furthering that. For those who will be attending the 4th of July parade, which is happening on Thursday, July 4th, here. That's so 2 weeks. Actually, it's just about a week and a half at this point. We'll get to see what is happening in our showroom.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, put that on your calendars. We actually did sit down and kind of figure out a bunch of the events and activities and travel schedule for the summer. Jeff and I are going to work to get that all updated on our website so that regardless of where you are in the country, if you're looking into the Great Lakes region, that you could go onto our website and find a little bit of event information and some links to those events. We'll get that up on the website accordingly, if it's not totally flushed out already. There's a lot of great events, both large scale and some of these smaller meet and greets. We'll be posting, some of that, I know. And there's like every weekend you can go to like a little meet and greet at a restaurant or whatnot. But I do know there's a number of event organizers. Geauga Jeepers is doing the Andover Jeep Invasion. All proceeds go to the Club Freedom Crawlers. Should be super cool. There is the Tool City Jeep Jam, which is a poker and dice run happening in the Crawford County, Southern Erie County area. Also, these are events that are meant to be a little bigger than your standard parking lot party, but not, we're not talking about Toledo Jeep Fest. We're not talking about Bantam. We're not talking about Ocean City. We're not talking Jeep Beach, So I think they're really cool, and I encourage people to get out and support those events. Oh, Oil Valley Jeepers, OVJ, and the 10 mile for 2 mile, those types of events, super cool, good, passionate people driving them forward.
And of course, our 4th of July parade.
Totes, our 4th of July parade in a week and a half. So 1 week from this Thursday here, we're going to be cooking some hot dogs, giving out some bagged chips, have a drink.
So we'll be ready for you guys to show up at 1 p.m. But if you're just coming for the parade, 4:30, get here for decorating. Otherwise, come early, hang out, get some food, drink.
Yeah, we're going to do some pricing specials, some potentially some scratch and dent product out for you, little things like that. Have the space reasonably opened up so that you can see some of the cool projects we're working on and just kind of be part of that experience.
Traditionally, our 4th of July parade has less Jeeps than our Christmas one. But I think this year we need to have a goal of 50 Jeeps for the 4th of July.
That sounds wonderful.
So bring your Jeeps.
So the challenge is on for our listening audience. If you're within that market radius that is close to our physical location, you got to get here.
Yep.
So
Fred's saying good morning also.
Good morning, Fred. So we do need to take a moment. The Jeep community as a whole did experience a loss over the weekend. It's kind of swept up many of the social pages.
I think all of them at this point.
I actually did a quick Facebook search, and I promise you, and I don't know anything about this. I don't know anything about this Facebook page, right? But it was called World News Hour. Okay, that's what it was called. Nothing Jeep, social, anything. World News Hour. And they were covering the untimely and unexpected passing of Allison Parliament, who was arguably known as the Mother Ducker, right?
Yep.
And, our own personal connection, if you were to go back from basically around season 2 or 3 of our podcast, you would know that Allison had joined us on set here, and we had done a podcast with her. Just a lovely individual who wanted to have fun with, fun with the Jeep community as a whole.
I mean, Scott was so giddy in that moment because of all the ducks that he got that day.
He did.
Yes.
He did.
Yeah.
And, and regardless of where you fall in the duck game as far as our industry is concerned, if we just look at a human being who sought to formalize the game and to get buy-in from the mothership, to get buy-in in kind of legitimate, in legitimacy.
The way, like, there's literally a billboard on Route 20 that a local dealership is literally using ducks for advertising and that kind of stuff, and you didn't see things like that before. She kind of spurred it,
helped
and
formalize it and focused it, right?
Yeah.
And so regardless of the illicit or explicit origination of where and how the ducks were and how to place them and not place them and give them away and not and whatever all that, you can get lost in that minutia. If we boil it down to an individual who sought to attempt to legitimize kind of the joy of appreciating each other for the vehicles that we drive. And she worked within the confines of Chrysler, Stellantis. She worked within dealerships, and she was at a lot of shows. She had a very strong following. So we do mourn her passing, and we, express best wishes to her friends and family. I know that obviously has created a void within that community. Jeff was working on some sound bites and a nice kind of a highlight piece from when she was on air with us a couple of years ago.
It's about 6 minutes of compiled clips, so we'll just play that now.
I have a really, really sick sense of humor. I like to torture my other half, who is a wonderful human being and puts up with my weird stuff all the time. And so I found out...
That's true love, obviously.
Oh, yeah. But I found out the border was closing due to COVID, and I wasn't going to be able to see him, and we didn't know for how long.
Okay.
The Canadian border ultimately had been closed for almost 2 years when they finally reopened it.
Okay.
And the rules have been interesting all the way across. But when this started, and I didn't know when I get home again, I decided to buy a bag of rubber ducks. I was going to hide them around the house to irritate him so he'd find them and laugh anytime he found them.
Nice.
I was going to be really creative about this, and I was really excited. And then I walked out of the store where I bought them in Bancroft, Ontario, and there was a Jeep. And I was like, I just got mine, and this is amazing.
You're excited. So you had just recently purchased the Jeep.
Yes, I had got it a month before.
Okay.
And, this one was all modded out, and I was stock. Like, it was sad. I was looking at mine going, it's a baby Jeep.
You got to start somewhere.
Oh,
right.
For sure. And so, I decided to write nice Jeep on the duck because I always have Sharpies on me. It's a thing.
Totes.
And I put it on the Jeep. A big, scary looking guy came out looking at the Jeep and the duck, and he's grinning, and I'm going, oh no, I'm dead.
Yeah, right, totally.
Totally. I'm praying he has a sense of humor, and thank God he did. He's the kindest man in the entire world.
That's awesome.
And he was like, we need to put this on social media. And so we hashtagged it on Instagram. We created an Instagram for it called Duck Duck Jeep.
Cool.
And that has evolved a little bit now, but we ended up with 2,000 followers very, very quickly. And we put up a Facebook group, and it kept growing. And, this started as a joke. We figured it would end in town, and it would be dead.
Sure.
And then we see it pop up all over the U.S., and we had 50 states represented in a few days. We had all the provinces popping in, and then we had other countries starting.
And what time? When was this? What year?
July of 2020 is when we started.
Okay.
This. And it's gone insane. Jeep actually released the 392 Rubicon keynote with the ducks. And Jim Morrison can be quoted with, the best part about the ducks was that it didn't come from corporate, which was a huge fangirl moment for me sitting in my living room watching this.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And it's been an amazing experience. We've got to work with Jeep. We have got to work with B.F. Goodrich. We've got to go out and about and travel all over the U.S. and Canada. We have not been to any of the other countries yet, but with a lot of lockdowns and other regulations, it's kind of hard to travel. But we've had an amazing time. I've met Jeepers all over. I've had many of them share their stories with us, laugh with many of them, cry with some of them, and it is a very humbling experience to hear people's stories with the ducks and how it made their day better, or it found them at a moment where they thought everything was falling apart and it would never be okay again.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's very, very amazing what this has done.
Scott is randomly holding up ducks to the screen. If you're joining us, audibly, Allison is trying to paint an appropriate.
That's what I'm here for.
This idea of this just massive reach of humanity, and Scott is holding up random ass ducks
And making sound
and
effects.
making sound effects.
It was a pirate duck that he was holding a second ago.
Go long, Jeff. Go long.
That's totally. Jeff has gotten a duck chucked at him. A chuck-a-duck is a thing.
Yeah.
Literally driving at 40 miles an hour on a highway.
Yeah.
Chuck-a-duck is the thing.
I Smoky Mountain was throwing them out the Jeep as we went down the streets cruising, because
Nice.
it was kind of a thing everybody was doing.
Uh-huh.
I totally hit a guy in the face, and I felt so bad. He's like, no, it's from the mother ducker. I'm so
Oh,
excited.
wow.
I'm like, oh, God.
The mother ducker.
Yeah, that's what they call me.
Wow. So Allison, you get a 4xe, which, let's just, if you know me, it makes me inherently
Super
jealous.
jelly.
Like just over the top jelly.
Mm-hmm.
How does that happen? How do you go from, owning your JK to then Jeep being like, yo, here's a 4xe to play with?
We asked very nicely. I messaged them and
Jeeps.
I'm done. I'm throwing ducks. I'm throwing ducks. I'm throwing a hissy. This is my man hissy fit.
This is Neil's way of asking for a 4x8 Jeep. They were asking, he's not politely asking, but I will do it for him. He really wants a 4xe.
As a person who has, oftentimes our business, we are more rugged individuals. We are functional Jeep experts. We are hardcore about off-road and suspension and performance and axle gearing and blah, 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 blah. And I'm here for the ducks because of the approach that Allison has. So here we are. We're walking away from the main drag of the event, and we're at an intersection, and there's a bone stock JLU. Sitting at the corner there, and it had just 14 gazillion ducks across the front windshield. And as the Jeep kind of just barely starts to accelerate away, Allison very appropriately, very nicely just says, "I like your ducks."
Yep.
Like it was that,
Oh, yeah.
right? This is. The Savage was there with me, Savage, myself, and Allison, and all she says is, "I like your ducks." This woman begins, not Allison, but the woman driver begins to pull through, and she smiles and is like, "Thank you," like real sincere.
Mm-hmm.
And then it happened.
It clicked.
You're Allison!
Yeah, she's like, "You stay there." I was like, "We're walking to that parking lot."
I was like, holy cannoli. Like, Scott and I have had some funny incidences
Yes.
with our own experiences, a level of notoriety within the technical Jeep community. But holy cow, this
We've
woman,
never been that. Nobody's been that excited.
that
Neil or
level
Scott.
excited.
No.
So the Jeep community as a whole mourns the loss of an individual and a person who gave a lot to the community as a whole, right?
Yep.
And to her friends and family, we wish you the best, and that community of duckers that you continue on and you find joy in the vehicles, the same way that we do, and
Yeah.
and at your level and at your pace. So
Now, while we had that playing, I see Bill jumped in and said good morning as well. So good morning, Bill.
excellent. We are going to talk for the remainder of the podcast here on Too Hot to Handle.
Yes.
Right. And so specifically, we're kind of coming in focusing on the JK, JLJT platforms,
Mm-hmm.
but a level of the older Jeeps as well. Is that a
Yes.
fair assessment? Right. So we're
Yeah.
going to focus our talk in.
Kind of applies to most things.
Yeah, general application. So, because it's kind of funny that that we should even, kind of all this combination, because as I'm driving my new cheap Jeep, which is a early model JKU, it is actually the era where we have a less desirable radiator,
Mm-hmm.
and we certainly don't have a PWM fan assembly.
Yes.
Right. And so I think I shared last week that my wife and I have taken the there's a number of trucks specifically. I think I shared this story last year that have cats in them at car shows. Last show. Did I share this story last show?
No, you just talked about how Diesel is getting up there in age.
Yeah.
And he's got severe separation anxiety.
So we throw him in the Jeep.
Throw him in the Jeep and kind of letting him live out his last
Few good years going to months, whatever he's got.
Yeah.
But we take him with us, and so we do that. But we take him in the Jeep, and the Jeep stays cool.
Yes.
Um,
Which allows him to get out and kind of
still do things with us, and because we're right on that cusp where dogs became your kids, right? Generation before us, the dog, your pets were just kind of there, right?
Yeah.
Generationally, America, Western culture is obsessed with our pets at this point. But
and for, our friend group, we were all so excited. We all bought our first house. We all were starting out, newly married, and we all had dogs.
yes, our
and
dogs.
we literally had a party at Neil's house where we did a meet and greet with our dogs.
That's
Because
right.
we hadn't had kids yet, so we're all
Right.
excited. We're all dog moms and dads.
Yes.
And I can't tell that story without saying that our dog, she's also, up there in age now because she was there. She was the only non-friendly dog at the
She
whole.
was the only non-friendly dog.
Everybody
on
else
the
was
co-
very happy to go play and do that stuff, and Susie was like, "Not here for it."
Nope. She had to maintain her own little private space.
Yes.
Regardless, the
Yeah.
whole idea is that Jen's Jeep, being a JLU with a PWM fan with
Yeah.
that 3.6 motor, just kind of sits there and idles beautifully. It also kind of modulates itself
Yeah.
functionally, whereas my new to me JKU is your standard minivan 3.8 with a mechanical fan. Well, it's not electric,
But it's old school.
it's
electric.
old school electric, right?
Yeah.
And not actually even a mechanical. But then I had to have a conversation just recently with an individual about a mechanical fan and kind of explaining the difference between a fixed mechanical fan and a
Yep.
viscous clutch mechanical fan.
Yep.
And so even my E-fan, it's rudimentary and it turns on and it turns off, right?
Yep.
Whereas a PWM fan is like a thermostat switch is the best way to think about
It's
it.
kind of like a rheostat on your wall that you can make the light
Correct.
brighter, dimmer. It constantly is varying the RPM of the fan.
And you'll know when it is hot because it'll sound like a jet engine.
Yes, it's just
And that's okay that it sounds
Yeah.
like a jet engine. And it's one of the calls that we used to deal with a lot when PWM fans became the standard. And of course, they come standard in 2012 with the 3.6 minivan motor that came in those small school buses.
Yeah.
I'm here for all the ripping on the JKUs, JLUs now. Now I'm like, I'm part of that crowd. I can make fun of them, But anyways,
I think the biggest challenge you have with your cooling system is, like most things, we talked about tires aging and other things. Your cooling system also ages, and you
Yes.
don't stop and realize, like, oh, how long's it been since I checked that system, or how have I maintained that system? And we kind of just ask for it to soldier on within an inch of its life, and then when it fails, mutter and kick at it.
Yes.
But there's a reason why it's failing or less than optimum.
well, absolutely. And, people think about, oh, I should change my diff fluid when I do water, mud
Yeah.
crossings. We think about, hey, my tires are wearing funny. I should take a look at my ball joints, hubs, and shocks.
Yep.
We see those things. Radiator caps go bad.
Yes, they do.
Hoses swell
Yep.
and pinhole. Water pumps lose efficiency and the bearings go in them from constant rotation.
Yep.
There's a bunch of components that, yes, they are slightly more robust, or maybe we just have less attention to them.
Yes.
But that does not make them any less critical to our overall, enjoyment or function of our vehicle.
Yep.
And so, radiators and cooling system has arguably been, something that we've been addressing as an automotive industry, for 100+ years at this point.
Right.
The VW is the only vehicle, to my knowledge, that is still, I guess, within the modern, like 40, 50 years, because it was air cooled,
Yes.
right? And so I guess what I was Scott's over here shaking his head at me. The point I was trying to make was that
There's other
basically
air cooled vehicles.
there are other air cooled, but they don't have the same notoriety. Like, very few vehicles that were air cooled ever made it to mass consumption or mass appreciation.
Yeah, I'll give
Right?
you that.
And that's kind of that's all I was going, is that typically speaking, people want water cooled. I still remember when ATVs went to water cooled.
When dirt bikes have switched from air cooled to water cooled,
and that's all that means, is that there's a radiator that helps dissipate heat
Yes.
and helps create longevity and better wearability of the internal combustion engine.
Yeah.
And I guess the point the big reach I'm making is that the only one that I can jump at is the VW Bug, which was air cooled.
Mhm.
Other than that, many of the other air cooled applications never were that successful.
Yeah.
Is what I'm trying to
And
to
more
share.
of a niche.
More of a niche market. Absolutely, right? So the idea of cooling down these internal combustion engines is incredibly important, and we've been refining this technology over decades. And I had to share with an individual recently about overflow bottles and the value. And of course, our earliest Willys did not necessarily have an overflow bottle.
All early vehicles pretty much did not have an overflow. And most people today don't even know how that system would work. My 36 is actually like this. So if you fill that system up to the top of the cap, it will puke antifreeze out. And then it seeks its own level. And basically, it's where expansion will not allow it to go up and come out, but it will not shrink enough that it will not be empty.
So when Scott says expansion, and it's valuable for my pedantic mindset to talk about thermodynamic expansion, and basically the heat transfer, so thermal, right, that happens within the engine block and within the radiator, expands water. It's like boiling water, right? And boiling water will start to increase volume in your pot on the stove. As you cool
and if
it,
you exceed that, you'll go over the side.
It'll spill over to the side of the pot. When you cool it, the thing is, some of that fluid was lost to vapor, right? It literally, evaporation happens while you're heating, and so the pot, the volume level that you started. So if you started with 4 cups of water and you took it up to just under a boil, and then
had
you
a lid on it,
and then you had a lid on it, you let it recede. There will be some of that vapor that will have been lost, and so that fluid will actually, be less. It'll be 3 cups and 7/8 or whatever, 3.5 cups. So your radiator system is actually very similar in the sense. Now the radiator system should not be boiling, which is one of the things.
Which is also why you have a radiator cap, because if you put it under pressure, then you raise the boiling point of the fluid. And it's, again, something people may or may not know. Old vehicles like a Willys or my 36, they literally have what's called a 4-pound to an 8-pound cap. The block, the radiator, that stuff is not designed for a high pressure, where our TJs and newer are 18 pounds of pressure, which is raising that boiling point much higher. To allow for the huge swings of temperature.
We should have done like a Bill Nye the Science Guy type episode where we had some kind of experiment.
Ooh, that's kind of fun. And so sealing that system is then forcing that fluid not to boil and evaporate. This is like the idea of, of having the lid off versus the lid on, that kind of conversation. Now, the next piece of this is going to be the barometric pressure, right? And so that's a little bit of a finite piece, but basically it's the pressure of the outside ambient air pushing back on the system, right? And so ultimately, our newest vehicles are closed systems, which basically should have the least amount of evaporation or vapor loss from your cooling system,
and environmentally sound. It's obviously not the best to just be randomly leaving antifreeze in random spaces with animals and wildlife and plants.
Correct.
So if obviously it's beneficial since the 70s on, we've had some sort of coolant reservoir tank that if it was to expand past the capacity of the radiator, it would go down a little tube into this open to the air relatively, so there's no pressure on it, bottle, which then is fed off the bottom of that bottle, or has a dip tube that goes to the bottom.
That goes all the way to the bottom.
So that when it cools off,
the pressure change actually creates that vacuum.
Yes, it will actually suck back from that bottle and refill up the radiator to the tippity top.
Yeah. It's a super cool. I mean, I get so giddy when we get to really the finite sciences of what we do, whether it's geometry or whether it's how science impacts the function of our vehicle. I remember being a kid, and I honestly remember being a kid riding a school bus and just thinking of how spectacularly brilliant these people were who had developed these vehicles, in the sense that, like, if you were to ask a young mind to create an engine out of space and just make it have an explosion inside of it, and then somehow make that you have to then ignite that somehow, and you know what I mean, and move it down the chain. It's one of the reasons why I love doing career day, because I love, like, breaking down a vehicle. Like, there's not magic in the vehicle, right? Anybody who wants to do it, who wants to learn about it, can learn. And the challenge is too much of our industry has been subjected over the years to just, random characters who change parts and blow on things like an old Nintendo cartridge and shoves it back in, and it kind of works, know? Whereas there's actually great sound science to keep pushing our industry forward, you know?
Perfect example. It's not exactly our main meat and potatoes of Jeeps, but we had a CJ5 come in. We had a bunch of problems with it, but as it was getting ready to leave, one system we had not looked at, mainly because the customer didn't ask us to, was the cooling system. And we had driven it around town, and it was relatively good. Was a V8, was not overheating, appropriate response, running well. And he came to get the Jeep. This is where the change happened. It was a little bit warmer, more humid day. He had let it sit and idle with no airflow while he was getting his trailer ready.
And
to
he
put
had
it on.
a mechanical fan.
And he
had a fixed.
He had a fixed blade
fan,
which, like most things, and this is just my personal opinion, there's a lot of mouse traps out there, and he had a mouse trap fan on, where these blades will sort of change pitch depending on RPM and force, which I've seen actually not work for most of them when I play with cars. But anyway, he had that type of fan, and it got to what we call critical mass. It got so hot that things were not happy, and it started just throwing antifreeze every which way, and it got really hot. Obviously, Jeep's upset, so now the owner's like, oh, what's going on with that? And we had to go out and kind of look at it. And
he was trying to load it onto his trailer is what it comes down to. He had been tooling around with it, and then while he was getting his ramps out and his straps out, he was just letting it sit there and idle before he put it up on his trailer.
So the reason I'm telling that is what it took to address that cooling system. When I got into it, I found a bunch of different things that relatively individualized would not upset the apple cart. But by the time that you add up all the strikes, now we have a system that has moved so far out of its window pane, we like to say, that it was not able to effectively work. So radiator was actually in pretty good shape. It had been mudded, but luckily it had not been packed full. If you go out mudding, wash out your radiator, people. Secondly,
and don't
I'm gonna
use
say
a high pressure washer though.
Do not use the highest high pressure setting with the jet nozzle of a pressure washer.
Destroy the radiator.
You'll destroy the fins of the radiator. You want to, the hard setting of a garden hose. A low or weak setting of your household pressure washer. That's what you're going to want to wash your radiator out with. The car wash the car wash washers are typically okay as well, though the car washes don't love our muddy Jeeps being there. But do
you
not
want to hit it before it becomes a concrete mess.
Yes. Correct. You want to constantly maintain it. We're not telling you to not go out in mud. That's always the thing. We always tell people, like, we're not big mud folks. We're not ourselves, but we do know how to do it successfully. Yeah.
So any regard, so what I started to find as I got through this process is the fan obviously was not my favorite. Opened up looking at the hoses, they were all swollen. Clamps were cattywampus. We actually had leaks at the radiator, lower hose. grabbed the fan. Water pump had the littlest bit of play, but it had play nevertheless. And we did a really easy, and you can do this at home yourself, grabbed the upper hose and squished it. And we heard volume of water change and went into the radiator without any restriction, which immediately told me and Greg the thermostat was either not present or was not right. So we found out that it had what's called a fail-safe thermostat, which basically all that means is it had failed and it fails open, so non-restrictive.
Right.
And I've had this argument with
you
lots
mean we
of...
need to have a radiator? We need to have a thermostat, or we don't need to have?
We do.
I know. Oh my God.
This is so prevalent. It's really I'm sorry I'm on my soapbox, but it's
you are.
real
That's
prevalent.
Okay. I mean, the problem is we agree on it. So
in the flathead world, it is such a hot topic, and there is a bunch of 70-plus-year-olds that think they know how a system works and how everything has to function. And if you own a flathead, it's going to overheat, and they run hot. I have had my car in the hottest of this summer so far, and it never gets over 180 degrees because it's all new. It's all healthy. It's got thermostats.
It's working harmoniously as a system.
It doesn't matter that I have an 8-cylinder Briggs & Stratton that's water cooled.
Right.
Any which way. So the important thing is this. So what do we do to fix this? We put a new thermostat in it. We put a new water pump on it, 2 new hoses, and I switched over to a clutch fan. Now, to start this process off, I just went out to the trailer. We kicked it. It spit out a clutch fan.
This is all the things you did on the CJ.
Yes.
Yes.
And filled it back up appropriately with coolant. All the leaks were fixed, and I let it start to burp out air, and it got warm again. And what that meant was the clutch was actually bad, so we replaced the clutch, and we went from being over 200 degrees, like 220 is about where I finally was like, okay, this isn't working, pulled the plug. With a new clutch, with the fan appropriate for that, with no shroud, the Jeep never crested 200.
Yes.
And it could sit out there and idle till the cows come home, and it was just happy.
Yes.
But again, I had to touch most of the system. I had to exchange the coolant, got rid of the old, put in fresh, made sure it was appropriately water to coolant ratio, and it just sung along. So when you get into these systems and you start to notice a problem, technically you're past the point of maintenance when you start to notice a problem. And this is kind of your wake-up call or warning. When you've gotten to the point where your Jeep's running hot, you now have a depreciated system, and it may touch everything in the system.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you're going to go in and tighten a hose clamp or add some coolant and magically everything's healed and happy. Can it happen? Yes. But most of the time it's because you have a marginalized system that needs looked at in its entirety.
Now, that being said, though, that the JLJT platform does run hotter than the JK. The
Correct.
JK runs hotter than...
You know what? That's a great statement, Jeff, because I remember being at an event up in Willoughby, Ohio, Jeepalooza, right?
Yes.
I actually think of this character with
Yes.
frequency.
Yes.
And we had specifically a gentleman come up to the booth and get fired up
Yes.
that his Jeep should ever hit 220 degrees.
A JK 2012 and newer, on average, will run 223 to 225 degrees happily. And people that don't completely, if you come back from the world of small block Chevys and that kind of stuff, they don't understand that, because that would be overheating for an older motor.
Yes.
I don't want my flathead to run 223 degrees.
Right. I
There's
mean,
a problem.
I remember coming into the automotive world, and it was about 180 degrees was the cusp of comfort.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And
then the 90s Jeeps wanted to run 210. That was our first push into the uncomfortable zone.
In the uncomfortable of 210.
Yeah.
And even then, the accepted mantra was to go out and buy a lower rated thermostat. So
Yes.
the thermostat opened earlier
Yes,
to keep the
because
system
those
cooler.
engineers didn't know what they were doing.
Dum-dums. Dum-dums.
And then next thing you know, you're talking to that person. They go, my Jeep, it's kind of lower on power and it doesn't get in good gas mileage now.
Right.
I wonder what's going on. Well, you put a colder thermostat in it, and now it's not as efficient as it was because in order to get a good spark and combustion experience in that motor, it needs to be hot.
Yes, and that is ultimately part of the efficiency of our newest platforms.
Yes.
That if the system is working in harmony with itself, so both from
How it's
our
designed.
timing, from our VVT timing to our oil pressures to our cooling,
Mm-hmm.
then the system actually will sit there and just sing away all day
Yes.
long, and it's beautiful, you
Yes.
know.
I
Get
think
in and start modifying it.
Well, I was going to say, I think it's important to talk about even just servicing it, especially the 3.6. You service that, you need to make sure that you're purging the air out of the system. And
How long on average, and this is a question to you guys, how long on average does it take us to burp a 3.6 post doing any type of service, but specifically
Opening the
oil
system.
coolers, but opening the system? Again,
Yeah.
3.6 is pretty much all of our new modern vehicles are closed systems. So anytime we change out a hose, an oil cooler, do a radiator, whatever, when we open that system, how long on average does it take us to burp a Jeep?
4 to 8 hours.
Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed. And if we're doing a big invasive job, because of just all of the little journals and valleys where coolant and air can pass through,
Mm-hmm.
we will make a big mess on times
Yes.
because there will be a big air pocket will just like magically appear
And it'll geyser.
and it'll geyser. Those of you who are purchasing cheap oil cooler assemblies online,
This is where it hits you.
and ultimately, you see like, hey, I could call the dealership and spend $300-400 on an oil cooler,
And this one's $60.
and this one's $60,
Yeah.
or this one's completely made out of aluminum.
Yeah.
And there's a reason that the dealership price is what it is, and it's not because it's a dealer price on this case.
Yes.
Correct. I agree entirely. That is true.
And yes, I completely understand. Metal feels better. I feel like it's more robust.
But the plastic cracks.
But
No.
No.
plastic is designed to be in that spot for a reason. So now you have aluminum. It's different on how it expands, contracts, how it transmits temperature. All of that changes, and you are changing.
Can we talk about the fact that Scott has used transmutes?
That
He has
I'm
talked
really
about
trying hard.
marginalized. Were you painting this morning?
I was not.
Were you painting parts? Because usually,
I'm trying hard.
holy cannoli. Okay.
So
He was not painting. He was staring at M38 paint, though.
Oh,
I was.
okay.
I was.
Okay.
But in regard, we there's a reason an engineer has to go to school and has to do very fine minutia on.
Wow, those are a lot of big words.
I might be lost at this point
on
on the development and design.
Yeah, and when we go in and we think we know better and we change one variable, you have thrown the whole mess.
Change one thing, change 100.
Yes. And I literally just had a phone call into last week. Guy with a WJ hating on his electric fan. I feel you. I understand. It sucks where they put the relay for it is in a terrible location. Sucks to get at. Fans were kind of confusing for people. And again, the systems get older. They don't understand. And they had a provision on trailer towing WJs with a straight 6. You could just put a mechanical fan on. This guy thought he had to then remove his electric fan. It's like, no, they literally were designed to work
To
together.
do both, yes.
It was just helping it not get to that critical mass because now we're putting extra load on this Jeep. It's already a big Jeep for a 4-liter and everything else. And he's like, well, I went to the parts store and that guy told me I need a 160-degree thermostat. Nope. I said, take that back. Get the one that says OE temperature, which is probably going to be a 195.
Correct.
Well, it's really hot. Yep, and your Jeep's designed to run 210 to 220. and it'll be perfectly fine if your system's healthy and doing what it's supposed to do.
Yep. Now, and we could kind of hammer home on trying to keep a quality assessment and maintenance of it. I do want to make sure that we do address airflow. One of the things we ran into with the 3.6s, specifically with the JKs, and the fans that you've mentioned already, is fan shrouds, right? A lot of CJs come in without shrouds. At some point in time, they broke. They got torn out of the Jeep, thrown away. They're on the JKs in the 3.6s. There's actually these little louvers, these little plastic louvers that encapsulate
plastic and rubber. Yeah,
that encapsulate the radiator that kind of close it off. And if you're going to Jim Bob's Garage and to change out your radiator, there's a very good chance that they're not going to take the time to reinstall these,
which we've experienced.
And I have factually experienced a Jeep that overheated. Now, it had some additional issues with it, but specifically it would overheat.
Made it more of a challenge because we had to then reset the starting gate back to stock to then go, oh, you actually have more problems
because of workmanship that was or wasn't done before.
And now now that we fixed what they broke, we now can actually fix the original problem.
Correct.
Which is two black eyes, because now we've paid once at Jim Bob's.
Yep.
He told us all the things that he thought he was an expert at. He broke it.
Yep.
Or left parts off. Now we have to charge you for those, install those, which is not easy. And then we still have a problem.
Yes. And so the value of the fan shroud, right? And I just get to the shrouds themselves.
And we're talking both sides of the radiator here.
We are, absolutely. Is that it focuses the air where and how the vehicle was originally intended to receive it.
Yep.
So the radiator fins and cooling aspects of that are very important, that we're focusing or funneling the air through the front. And that's one of the challenges with the 8274 winch, which I love desperately.
But if your cooling system is healthy, it will not
be a problem.
Bring your Jeep to its
But
knees.
a lot of people will be like, well, you can't have the winch in front of the grill because it messes up airflow.
Yeah.
And it does a little bit. I'll give you that.
If we're in the Sahara Desert and it's idling, we might see a difference.
Absolutely.
I just want to go to the comments real fast. Chuck said, the doctor is in today. My IQ went up after today's show.
Yes.
Now, we've talked about the service. You talked about some of the key components. But as a last ending piece, what can people do to make it even more efficient? How can they help keep their Jeeps a little cooler?
So you want to make sure, again, you want to wash out your system. You want to make sure that it's maintained properly. Antifreeze has a life. You want to be making sure that you're doing, there's things in the book that says, like, you're supposed to flush your coolant. You're supposed to do brake fluids exchange. It's in there for a reason. I get it. I'm as bad as the most that I don't think about it. The systems don't get always on my own vehicles fixed or are refreshed until something catastrophic happens.
Yep.
So I get it. But if you're asking why I'm having a problem, well, that's the maintenance piece. That's where you are. You have to look at your vehicle. And one more soapbox piece. The reason why your old vehicles have screw worm gear hose clamps and your new vehicles have spring clamps. Their spring clamps are not there to be a pain to remove.
Right.
But you have an 18-pound cap on your vehicle with your spring clamps. They hold constant tension on that hose. A worm gear clamp has more tension in one spot than another. We have seen it over and over and over again that the spring clamp broke, or they were so mad at it that it went flying across the shop.
Well, Jim Bob's Garage is constantly taking them
spring
off.
clamps off.
Constantly taking them off and putting on worm gear clamps.
And then the person comes in and says, well, my Jeeps, I smell antifreeze. Yes, because your worm gear clamps are not clamping the hose properly at 18 pounds and at 223 degrees.
You're letting in air. If it can come out, stuff can get in.
Yes.
There's a whole bunch there. And when Scott says spring clamps, he is talking about spring steel formed clamps, right?
Yep.
And so they pinch and release they move with thermodynamic properties,
yes.
whereas the worm gear It
It
has
is
no
what it
motion
is.
in the ocean. It is what it is.
On my 36, worm gear clamps are perfect.
Right.
'Cause
4 pounds of pressure on
it's
the
fine.
system is fine.
And it never gets over 180 degrees. It's a whole different system. But guess what? My flathead still has thermostats,
So what?
and it's working.
So I was gonna say the coolant and exchanging and making sure that you have fresh, appropriate service coolant.
Yep.
Making sure that your hoses are not pinholing or weeping around the kind of the throat or the clamp position itself.
100%. And don't buy your coolant replacement parts on Wish. Go buy appropriate name brand quality parts.
Temu, not buying from Temu.
Yeah.
What about hood louvers?
So in a vehicle that is already challenging. So this is a good story. It's kind of involved, goes to do with my 36, and people seem to enjoy that. So my dad had a 36 Ford Coupe when I was really little, and it's one of the reasons I wanted to have my sedan. That vehicle got sold a couple times, and we watched it as we knew the origin of that coupe. And a dealership bought it, and he didn't like the way the louvers on the hood sides looked. So he had a custom set of hood sides made that were solid. And then the car started to overheat.
Sure.
And it was like, well, what's going on? So then people start throwing parts at it. The air could get in the radiator, but it couldn't get out of the radiator. So where we see a problem with this is primarily our XJs and MJs. And I'll give you a reason why. So those vehicles were actually designed for a little V6. The engineer never intended to put a straight 6 in them. That's why the engine bay was so short. And that is why in 87 they had to re-engineer it to make the straight 6 fit.
Sure.
But now that means we're trying to actually take a hole that was designed for a skinny, tall radiator with the V6 that had plenty of room. Now the motor's in that space. So now we went with a very wide, short radiator, and brand new, all good, everything's optimum. They will work. They get a little warmer than we like.
Correct.
We've all talked about XJ brakes and that kind of stuff where we pop the hood. Or there used to be a spacer kit that would raise the back of the hood to get airflow
Can't
out.
begin to tell you how many times I drove home at like 20 miles per hour with just the hood catch.
Yes. Just pop in because we're at critical mass.
Critical mass, but I want to keep moving.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I put on my 96 XJ, the last one, I put the smallest hood louvers that you can pretty much on, and I saw 20 degrees of difference. So much so that when I was barely crawling, the louvers were allowing the air to attack me because I could feel it in the vehicle.
Sure.
And if you were to go with a full set of hood louvers, it will only help.
Yes.
There's a reason why things are louvered.
And ultimately, when folks have come to me over the years and asked about doing V8 conversions in any vehicle, I always say my biggest challenge with V8 conversions is going to be heat transference. And so ensuring that some type of cowl or louver.
Yep.
The other piece that you're going to want to do in general is make sure that you can continue to get fresh air into the system, because if you're just recirculating hot air into the engine, you're only going to make problems for your engine as a whole. You might not even notice it because of the efficiency of the PWM fans of the newer models.
And just the last comment, Rob is on there saying, I did louvers on my YJ and did not change running temp one bit. It does let heat out of the engine bay. If your system is already happy at its running temp and you add louvers and it didn't really technically need louvers, CJ and YJ engine bays are pretty big. They have a pretty good excess of the air getting out. The louvers do definitely help it cool down. But if it was already happily working, you're not going to see a big difference. On an XJ where you're not optimum, you're going to see a huge difference because we're optimizing that now.
Correct. And also with V8 conversions and whatnot.
Yeah, if you're choking, like a good example is our TJ Hemi swap. We've packed way more engine in that bay. We've made it more like an XJ. Now air can't get out. The V8's got more cylinders. It's making more heat. We now need to help it get the air out.
And I know that we this one's really one that I'm very passionate. We don't want to crust over into a additional episode. It's just not necessary, and we do need to close it out here. A functioning radiator, and one thing I can factually tell you is radiator technology has changed over the years.
A couple times,
and we've had very, very good radiators in the beginning, and then we got crummy radiators as we wanted more out of the systems.
Yep.
It almost feels like the folks who have been engineering cooling systems over the years have been disconnected silos of engineering. So like you'll get an advancement in radiator technology, but like a failure in like airflow. And then, it's just kind of this weird, rat race. The most recent, the JLJT series, feels the most complete overall.
Yeah.
But if you are retrofitting an older vehicle or even doing some type of V8 in our newest, the actual technology in the radiator itself, if you're getting an appropriate transference of fluid through the radiator where it actually has enough time to appropriately exchange thermodynamic properties, cooling and heating, then that's best. I've actually seen them before where the inlet and the outlet were on the same side and on the same tank. And so basically the vast majority of the radiator was just ambient temperature exchange. It was not actually fluid exchange in the process. It was just basically filling up the tank, and some stuff would come in at the top or bottom and just kind of immediately exchange on one side.
Which doesn't mean if they're both on the same side that's wrong. It means that the radiator has to be designed to allow for that.
To allow for that with appropriate flow. The other piece is the water pump itself. We actually had there are multiple. There are high volume, low pressure. There's high pressure, low volume. There's a whole bunch of different pieces of that conversation because
and you can move the water too fast or too slow.
Because you can actually move the water too fast or too slow based on your application. The vast majority of our listeners hopefully found this to be beneficial.
Yeah.
And arguably, if we're doing routine and regular maintenance on our newer model vehicles, and when I say newer, I am talking about 20 years at this point. So this is not like a 3 to 5 year standard conversation. They're newer vehicles. As long as everything is up to snuff and working in harmony, the system is just going to hum along beautifully for you.
Yep.
If you have any questions or, seek further clarification, you can always hit us up on our text-only number, 440-855-2100. You can email us directly at jeffc@sfj4x4.com. That's emailing directly into the producer, Jeffrey, here about the show itself. If you have further questions about technical aspects, you can email us at contact, CONTACT, at SFJ4x4. Lots of ways to get in touch with us. We have an incredibly busy summer.
Yep.
Today was a banger. It was an ups and downs of emotion, and I wish the best for the Jeep community as a whole. I do want to make a public statement as well, furthermore, on me, is just we are at a unique position where we are getting inquiries from every direction on estimates and services that people are wanting for us. We want to do all of these things for you. But we need a little bit of patience in the process because we are experiencing such an overwhelming outpouring of interest recently.
And we thank you, and don't stop.
Don't stop.
But just be patient with us.
But please continue your patience and appreciation for the services we provide. We've got a lot of work to do, a lot of Jeeps to be built,
Yes.
building, to do something.
I don't know.
And on that note, Jeep on.
Jeep on.
Jeep on.